right. Well, welcome to the Good Standing Podcast. We have Darin Carter here today. Darin does a lot of different things within the cryptocurrency and impact space. We recently met as part of an initiative that you head or run at Coinbase, which is called Stand with Crypto. We met on the Hill in Washington, D.C. You've been escorting me to senator offices and House of Representatives to talk a lot about real-world use cases and implications and the need for regulation in this space. So we can get into a little of that, but I'd love to kind of start with your background related to impact, because that's where we have connected mostly in our conversations. And I'd love to hear, some stories around what that experience was like for you growing up. When did you kind of consciously find yourself in sort of an impact framework?
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here on the podcast. Thank you both for inviting me. As you were alluding to earlier, I work at Coinbase. I run our community engagement program. I was one of the people who helped initially launch Stand with Crypto, which has now grown up to be its own independent nonprofit that continues to engage millions of advocates all over the United States. And in parallel, have had the opportunity to meet some phenomenal founders all throughout the United States who are working on real world use cases that leverage blockchain and crypto and having an impact in this world. I've been at Coinbase for about 6 years now. Actually, it'll be 6 years in a week. So I'm celebrating
Congrats.
early. Thank you. And obviously have seen the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs of the market itself, but was always really a true believer in the technology. And I just feel like if I reflect on how I got here and my experience professionally, I'm just so thankful and blessed to be in the right rooms, in the right places at the right time, and with the right ethic and skills to put me in a position now to continue to lead and make sure that we're pushing forward on legislation, but also highlighting the real world use cases that are out there, because there's so many amazing things that are being built. And I love this platform because it helps give those people who are really building in this space an opportunity to talk about what they're building. And it's so easy to get kind of caught up in your day-to-day. And, I see it as my role and responsibility to make sure that I'm intentional about the people who we bring along for that journey. And I'm really thankful for the work that you guys do, outside of our visits to Capitol Hill. So it's been fun.
Nice. Yeah. Take us back to Darin growing up and when you kind of found yourself getting into the impact space.
Yeah. So I am a proud New Yorker. I grew up in Rochester, New York, not to be confused with Westchester, very far from New York City, very close to Canada. And my parents had actually moved there from, by way of Michigan, but from Alabama and Louisiana. So my family's roots are still in the South. I was born in Rochester because my dad had worked at Xerox, and Xerox had a huge hub there. My mom was at Strong Memorial Hospital. And, I think really like the family values are the foundation for why I have been so engaged in impact. They were stewards of the community, very involved in the church, right? Like always like kind of helping out the community. And, in addition to all of that, my father was actually related to the late Congressman John Lewis.
Oh, wow.
And, spending time with him, even as a young person, I was able to just kind of absorb his aura in a sense. And like, he just exuded the mantra of good trouble. Mm-hmm. So that was like something that I've carried forward in all of my work. And, now that's kind of a mantra that still kind of guides me today and, inside and outside of work. So I'd say growing up, those were, formative figures for me. My parents, obviously John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, the work that we do in the community and our service. And then it wasn't until after college, so I went to college at Penn State. I studied cybersecurity there. Wow. And when I had stepped on campus, I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Even before I stepped on campus, I never thought I would leave Rochester, New York. I felt like it's expensive to go out of state. I'm happy here at home. Like, why dream bigger than that? And my mom was just like nudging me. She's like, no, you should go visit Penn State, do a campus tour. That literally the first day I stepped on campus, I knew that's where I wanted to be. And thankfully, they had this new program for information sciences and technology and cybersecurity. So I just went in with a very curious mind. I said, hey, I'll say yes. If you guys are telling me this is a brand new program, brand new facility, this is where I want to start to learn and build my career. So early on, I was in the cybersecurity courses and thought I wanted to go into like the NSA or something, and thought that was my career trajectory because that was kind of like laid out for me. And it was actually on a flight. It was a flight, and we were connecting through Hong Kong, and someone had shared a book with me. It was an economics book, and I'm just like reading through, and I was intrigued by this word externalities. And I just kept digging into that. I was like, what is this all about? How I internalized it was the externalities are things that happen as a result of your actions. Like the positive externalities could be like the positive things that radiate from the actions that you do in your direct presence. And that was another principle that stuck with me, to be very, very aware of the externalities of our actions and very intentional, because if done right, that could have a lot of positive outcomes. So those were like the formative years. And then after graduating from Penn State, I had the opportunity to work at EY in Philadelphia. Loved Philadelphia. It was a great place to get my career started. I was in my head between like, do I want to go to Philly or New York? And EY Philly was just right for me at the time. And still, look back and really admire the people that I met there and the professional rigor that they held me to, and really the exposure that it gave me. So I was on a client, and they had a data center out in California that they wanted me to go visit. And I had always dreamed of eventually living in San Francisco and working in tech. And that was my first time ever in the state of California. So had it not been for UI Philly, I would not have been on a plane to California. And, through a number of other just kind of like random happenstances, it's another book situation. I was chopping it up with someone on the plane. I shared a book with them, and they loved it so much. And she said, well, what do you do? And, what are you interested in? And so on and so forth. And I told her a little about my story. I work in EY Philadelphia. I'm only here for a couple days. It's always been my dream to actually like work in tech and so on and so forth. And she just happened to be like a high-level employee at Google. Oh, wow. And she invited me to campus the next day.
Oh, wow.
So Allie, if you're listening to this, thank you for inviting me on campus for lunch. And then from that moment, I just knew that I wanted to live in San Francisco. So it wasn't long after that where I got an opportunity at a tech company, moved my life out to San Francisco. And then that was like beginning of phase 2 of my career. That was like a whole new world. Everything that I had known on the East Coast was very different. I moved out there only knowing a few people. I'm working in tech for the first time, but I felt, very thankful to have this opportunity. And I think it's just kind of like consecutive doors that continue to open for you.
Can I just ask a quick question, Ash? What were those 2 books, if you recall? The first book,
okay,
Externalities, and then the second book?
Second book is A Confederacy of Dunces.
Oh, yeah. Kennedy.
Yes, John Kennedy Toole.
Yes, whose mom posthumously got that published.
Yes.
You know the story? Go ahead, tell.
Wild story. So I was actually, where I bought this book was at a bookstore near the Fish Market in Seattle. Also my first time in Seattle, so that was great. And I somehow just stumbled across this book and was just reading a few pages. It was the only book to actually make me laugh out loud.
Yes.
It was actually phenomenal.
Yes.
So
yes.
I got the book, and the story of it is, I want to say he's an artist from an author from Louisiana area, like New Orleans or something. And he had written this book, and he was trying to get it published. And just after failure and rejection after rejection, he was just it weighed on him so much. He ended up, I think, taking his own life, unfortunately.
And I think even during the process of writing it, I believe, and for much of his life, I think he was struggling with some mental issues to some degree. Exactly what, I don't know, because he is brilliant. It might have been like a little autistic. I'm speculating here.
Right.
And who knows what else. But I think at that time, and perhaps for his generation, it wasn't as easily diagnosed, perhaps. But I do think during his lifetime, he was struggling with some mental things too.
Exactly. And the community notes will help us out on all of this, but I'm glad that we both know.
I'll be digging in. Yeah, that's partly my job too. All right.
And what's the premise of Confederacy of Dunces?
It follows this guy, Ignatius, I think his name is. And it was, I don't know, it's just like, it's a Confederacy of Dunces. It's just like a tale.
Do you know this word, Brobdingnagian? Have you heard this word?
Everybody knows that word. You don't know this word?
Brobdingnagian. It's an excellent word. This is a real word. But I think I discovered it through reading this book, mostly through reviews of the book. And I believe the word originates from Gulliver's Travels. You know, Gulliver's, he gets tied up by the little people, and at one point he's a little person, and whatever. Gulliver's Travels. And the word means essentially, or it's come to mean, leaping off Gulliver's Travels, a sort of wild, kind of larger than life, almost to an irrational degree, sort of personality. And I think this guy, the character, and probably the author too, were Brobdingnagian in life and in fiction. Yeah, so it's sort of his slight comedy of errors, sort of bumbling through life, his sort of witty observations.
Exactly. And that's exactly why it was so like outrageously hilarious. I'd never read a book that had this character just like dripping off the page. So like that was just really intriguing. And I didn't even know I was going to stumble into that until, you know, I started flipping through the pages and this woman's like, why is this guy laughing on a plane? It's weird.
Yeah. It's like brilliantly absurdist in a lot of ways.
Right. So I'm glad we both know Confederacy of Dunces, and I'm going to have to write down that word so I can properly describe it.
I think my mom got it for me, and I think she was kind of inspired by the Real World Mother getting it published, but also was like, if you're actually thinking about writing, get it done so it doesn't have to come to that.
Exactly.
And I think she was also saying, you're probably kind of crazy, a little bit like this guy too. Crazy in a flattering way. I don't mean to be disrespectful to this gentleman who, again, not really sure the actual author, what he was sort of dealing with.
Right. And that's that's literally why it's somewhat tragic in a sense, but, you know, to finish the story, his mom goes on, finds a publisher who gives her a chance, and it goes on to win a Pulitzer Prize and is now like a classic tale.
Yeah, certainly a great book of the modern age, if you will. Yeah.
And do you think this sort of set you off on your journey into San Francisco, sort of larger than life, you know, going into the tech world? And what did you find going into the tech world that maybe matched your expectations? But also, if you can share maybe some things that were idealized before that when you actually got there were different than you expected.
That is such a great call out, because I obviously had come in with, you know, 20 plus years of norms from the East Coast and the professional, you know, I don't call it rigor. I think that, trust me, tech is plenty rigorous. Just like the cadence that I would have from the EY days, right? Like I'm in my suit and tie, and I'm dressed up, I'm going on client site, like I'm truly a consultant. And San Francisco is very different, especially at that time. I'm trying to remember exactly what year it was. Maybe it was 2017 when I decided to make the move out there.
All right.
So I got a few great years before COVID. I do remember stubbornly showing up to San Francisco thinking that I was going to pay my Philadelphia rent in SF. So I said, what does $700 get me in San Francisco?
A sandwich, maybe.
Yeah. So, and it felt like a Confederacy of Dunces. I landed in a 5-bedroom, 1-bathroom spot with a really cool bookcase and a rooftop to go to go hang out. And that lasted for a couple months before I said, okay, let me reevaluate my budget here and continue to invest in a different living situation. I think my Salesforce experience was so powerful because at that time, again, it was my first foray into tech, but Mark Benioff as a CEO and Salesforce as an organization was really intentional about kind of living their 1-1-1 value. So 1% of time, 1% of equity, 1% of profit gets essentially donated or given back to the community. And I think that's also it's the result of who he is as a CEO and a leader. The fact that he's, I believe, from San Francisco and one of the largest employers in San Francisco. So what you get when you have such a large employer in that one space, and really just kind of like the mindset and the ethos of the people that were working at this tech company, is that the company can do really good and you can do really good for the community. And you would see it kind of exuded. And I had never seen that and felt what it's like to work at an organization like that. And I think it really stuck with me. I was very happy that I knew there was a vehicle for my externalities to have positive impact during my time in San Francisco, because it was definitely a land of the haves and the have-nots. I think there were so many people who were moving at that time to get their tech passport stamped by working at one of these tech companies, that you ended up getting an era or a few people who were treating it more like Hotel California than a home. And that was also disheartening to me, because I'm like, this city mints millionaires. Why are we struggling so much to address certain things that I see on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't have to dodge everything on the streets, and then I walk into my posh, tech tower, and I'm literally fed food, right? And I have all the resources there.
Yeah.
And then I go home and I, traverse the streets until I make it home safely and back into my little palace. So I didn't appreciate having to see all of that, but it also gave me a lot of hope, because the people that you're interacting with are brilliant, and I just think that there's so much opportunity for tech to be a driver for good. So that's kind of like the formative experience that I had in San Francisco.
A microcosm for a lot of the wealth disparity, the have and have not across the country too. That was a great question. I was going there too, but can we get the other book too? We had a Confederacy of Dunces.
There's two books. So the other book is an economics book, and I can visualize the cover of it. And I probably should have read the title. If anyone knows, this one economics book has a white cover and a silhouette of a person in green on the cover, and on page 36 there's the word externalities. That's the book.
This is where AI comes in. I think this is the first time I've come across a real world use case for AI. This is it.
Exactly. Crypto has so many more use cases, and AI is just over here trying to flounder and trying to find product market fit.
All right, well, I'll look that up. I'll figure that out.
Okay, I have the book. I do, so I can also look it up.
Okay.
Is it really page 36?
I can't tell you all that.
I thought you might have
some things are off the record.
Right. Am I going to get fact checked on this show?
Well, I love that you say externalities in the positive way, because I'm used to hearing that word in the context of the externalities of industry, like climate change, emissions, or impacts on indigenous communities when a rubber plant moves in and destroys sort of the local resources there and only takes the profits and doesn't reinvest anything locally. But I love how when you saw that word, you thought about, well, what are the positive implications of that? And ultimately, that is what I believe business should be, is about, doing well for the business, and how can that also do well for the community. And I think that's the paradigm that we're moving into. I don't know if everyone's yet on board, but that's a lot of what this platform is about, is saying how can we help more people get on board with that new paradigm, because if we don't, there's a lot of repercussions. So what do you think kind of contributed to you having such a positive outlook and seeing that rather than going to where most people go when they read that word?
That's such a great point. I feel like I'm hopefully optimistic, not hopelessly optimistic. And when I read the word, I obviously did understand that there are negative externalities out there. But I also understood that the economics can be redesigned. They can be reformed. And I think that was another element that drew me to this new, crypto economy, is the idea that we have the opportunity to shape the economic incentives around something that is better, not perfect, but at least acknowledges some of the flaws of a particular system that's been in place for years and years, and it's gone beyond maximization. It's like extracting to the point where we're facing existential risks, right? And there are so many people that understand that and likely feel like the objects in motion are continuously staying in motion. And being early adopters of this technology, we have the opportunity to shape where it goes at the foundation and really influence the trajectory of it. So when I see, people like you who are doing good with the technology, I'm really excited to see that you're here early, you're here often, that you're continuously building community, and that you're scaling your impact, because I think that absolutely needs to be built into the foundation of where this is going, so that we're not looking back in 10, 20 years and asking ourselves, where could we have been had we been intentional about where we stepped, in the early days.
If you can go a little deeper on being in the Bay Area and seeing what's happening on the ground. Are you vocalizing? Are you, in a positive way, escalating your concerns on what you see on the ground to people in tech generally, to Benioff perhaps, who was at the forefront of trying to kind of revitalize the tenderloin and to address some of the homelessness issues, take a look at some of the real estate situations? I remember reading a report on that, and I'll dig into that a little bit more. So did you vocalize that? Were you on the ground doing work right on the heels of this awareness, if you will, or this consciousness over that disparity? So just for a minute before we build on what you were saying, take us to that moment there. Because I'm curious,
right?
Because we watch movies, we see TV shows, we read a million articles of this notion of apathy, or people achieve that position at those big organizations. And by the way, some of them who did are perhaps no longer there. Maybe recently laid off this year, the end of last year, maybe a few years ago. Maybe they're hanging on for dear life as we speak. Right. Who knows? So I just want to make it clear that people who rode the wave or drove themselves, often through hard work too, let's be real, to achieve those positions, maybe those positions don't exactly exist at the moment, right? But so, people
there have definitely been some tectonic shifts.
There's been some big shifts. So
in the industry.
But around 2017, 18, just before COVID, you're seeing what's happening on the ground. I'm sure a lot of that got pretty wild in terms of people who were already struggling to fulfill their basic needs, and suddenly you're in a pandemic. I'm sure that got worse for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But just take us to that moment and how you navigated that.
That's such a great question. I think at the time I didn't recognize that where I am today in policy, right, had a role to play in how that world was manifesting at that time. What I could understand is I live in San Francisco, which again is a beautiful city. It's millionaires and there's like all this tech talent around me. But my rent is astronomical. I'm living with 5 other people, and my landlord commands my first paycheck every month, even though I've made pretty decent money. And that there are people outside that are struggling with certain addictions or whatever. The conditions of the streets were in certain parts, very tricky. So you were alluding to Benioff trying to address what's happening in the tenderloin. And this is obviously not to blame anyone for the policies that kind of created that, but I didn't understand that like policy can be a solve there, and that's where you can get really engaged. But I knew I was a tech worker, right? Like I'd achieved my dream of working in tech and like being at the forefront of emerging technology. And over time, I actually like evolved my aperture to recognize that it's not just about showing up, getting your tech passport stamped, and just like, working on whatever work product you have there, right? You have to be really cognizant of the externalities, and be really intentional about like, who are engaging, how is this impacting certain communities? Is there more we can do? Are we fixing things, right? Because in the world of tech, I feel like the mantra that commands the momentum is move fast and break things. They're very proud to say we move fast and we break things. And over time, I've been like, maybe we would have better outcomes, better outputs if we move fast and we fix things. We see certain things and we are quick to be solution oriented to that. And one of the things I do love about working at Coinbase is the fact that like it is very biased towards action. Action drives more information. We're doers. Like we're going to get in there. We're going to like try stuff. And I felt like that plus, being at the intersection of, this new and growing economy would be really, really powerful. So over time, I started to develop a wider appreciation. But at that time in San Francisco, I'm not going to lie, it was very hard. It was very hard to feel like I'm like, am I the gentrifier? Am I part of the problem here? And am I drifting away from other people who are also serving this community? It's very tech dense. So, so-and-so's not a tech company. They're probably at a finance company. But I would talk to, other people who I would interact with, let's say on, the BART or whatever, and teachers would have a really difficult time affording to live where they teach. People who work in healthcare, obviously during COVID, were overwhelmed, right? And meanwhile, I'm a laptop warrior working remote from wherever, right? And I'm very fortunate to have that situation, and I don't blame anyone for having that, but I do have a lot of empathy for the people who actually put in that sweat equity to make the city what it is. And I think that there's so much that can be done, but people are kind of like tunnel visioned on, what are they building, what are they doing, and kind of individualistic in a sense, because at that time there was such a flood of people outside in, it felt like a very transient city. And they're here for Hotel California. Stay, the maid will come clean this up.
Yeah, what do you think could be done to foster a tech culture that cares more about fixing things, that's more interested in the community and the externalities in a positive way? What have you seen and worked on personally, and what do you also think could be done systemically?
Let me see. These are great questions. I would say, because I don't have any, perfect answers, but I will reflect on, my journey into policy today and how I think that has been an eye-opening experience that maybe other tech workers can relate to and glean some learnings from. So I was saying that we had launched Stand With Crypto in response to the need for some regulatory clarity. Years later, you see, millions of people who have stood up as Stand With Crypto advocates. We've had the opportunity to engage founders who are building real-world use cases and really just want clear rules of the road here in the United States. And reflecting on that experience, I noticed that a lot of people who had been previously politically disengaged, and not political in the sense of red versus blue or anything in between, but like just really unaware of how government and governance works, have now finally joined the fight, right? And now they're so much more attuned to how to advocate for their needs and how to also cooperate with their local, state, federal policymakers. And I think because we've lived in this world, it's hyper digital, it's social media first, like you're working on your tech thing, there's a lot of things going on in everyone's day-to-day life. Over time, we had drifted to a point where we took some of that for granted, right? You vote, they rule, and that's kind of how life had worked for a while. And not until there was a need for them to actually step into that void and re-engage did we start to see some traction, some movement. And I really saw a lot of people flick the light bulb, like it really turned on for them. So I would hope that people are responsible stewards of their community and are cognizant that we have the agency to build a better world. It is absolutely possible. It requires action and it requires community. There's no one person that's going to do it. It also requires leadership, right? It's grassroots, but it's also top down. There's a role for everyone to play in all of this. So I think that's kind of what I glean from the overall experience. And I'm sure there's a bunch of ways that people can kind of get involved, but for anyone listening, just kind of think about what are the core things that you want to get involved with. Find something local that you can get engaged with and find other communities that are already building it. A lot of times people might be kind of intimidated by the idea of, hey, I have to start this by myself from zero to try and build it and scale it and so on and so forth. When really there's a lot of other like-minded people that are out there. So, throw yourself out there, connect with them, be present, continue to build, and lend your talents, right? I think that's another really powerful thing that I learned about the talent pool in San Francisco and New York and other major cities that draw these people. When you collect these resources and you focus on a particular goal and you have an organized system and method for this, you can do anything. You can really accomplish some stuff. That's how these tech companies and organizations are out here building the products of the future. And all a company is just an organized group of people. So even without that common thread of that company name there, we are still the same group of people with the same talents who all want a better New York, better San Francisco, a better Chicago, you name it. And it will take time, it will take effort, but there's something that we can collectively do to make that a reality. It does require your engagement. It is a multiplayer game.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts, and first of all, I appreciate everything you just said there. I think engagement, to be totally honest, I was complaining to Ashley walking around the streets how disengaged people are from just being present and aware. And it's not everybody, and I know I sound like grandpa, get off my lawn right now. But I just wanted to make a note about engagement. And, we're all on our phones here and there and stuff, so I'm not completely divorced from that. But I just wanted to make a note that being engaged, not just with, massive impact initiatives globally, collectively, but to just be engaged as much as you can and to be present is more than I think people generally are. And I think what you were saying about things moving, accelerating at a rapid pace, people can feel a bit of despair, a feeling like they're being left behind or they can't catch up. And to some degree, this increases their disengagement. And maybe they have a point where they choose to engage. But I just want to make a note about what does it mean to be engaged and be present just in these like micro moments day to day. So sorry to do a PSA here, but be engaged while you're crossing the street and walking down the sidewalk and when you're having a conversation with somebody.
Right.
By the way, real quick aside, I read that a big thing bubbling up in the Bay Area are consultants who have to teach Gen Z how to properly engage professionally, where they're commanding big fees to just say, hey, this is how we engage with people. This is how we operate professionally. So that's just a little funny aside. And
so you're saying I could start my own little boot camp?
Yes, you can, and I think you should. And I might start one in New York City. Watch out. Anyway, but really be engaged. The other note I want to make is something Ashley and I talk about a lot, which is part of what we're seeing with wealth disparity and these people at companies, these people who make companies, is the C-suite, the executives, the CEOs, the whatevers, who are making some ridiculous amount, some order of magnitude more, some exponential number more than like the entire company combined. Of course, this is reflected generally in our economy, a very small group of people. So I think there's a lot of animosity towards not just this sort of wealth hoarding, but to some degree leadership, that we've entered into a space where the leaders of companies are often painted with, sometimes deservedly so, but maybe sometimes not, this sort of pejorative brush that's like leaders now must be disconnected, they must be bad. And I do think that there's clearly this groundswell, and I think it's moved beyond that, to an emphasis on the collective body, the collective organization, and making sure everybody's being taken care of.
Right.
But I know that Ashley and I often talked about the importance of leadership, and I'm jumping off what you said. This can't be taken for granted. Good leaders emerge across the animal kingdom, obviously across the human species, certainly in corporations, in politics, in sports. Teams have captains, and they're indispensable great leaders. And of course, sometimes we have bad leaders, you know what I mean? But I just wanted to put a little emphasis on what it means to be good leaders. And I think people who are good leaders, or people who have the quality to be good leaders, should step into leadership roles and not be afraid to be leaders at a time where the CEOs, the presidents are sort of being rightfully criticized, just with good standing. This platform and an app that we're building, we're constantly talking about what does it mean for people to have ownership in tech platforms going forward, to have equity. This is so important. But at the same time, so is leadership. And so is the effort. And you talk about sweat equity and just actual general capital to build something. I could go on, and maybe I just want to throw this to you, but do you consider yourself a leader? I think we do over here. But take us back to maybe Salesforce. You're in the Bay Area, and you've got this cool job. You're getting your tech passport stamped. But what did it mean then for you to seek out leadership? And what does it mean for you then and now to be a leader yourself?
those are great questions. And I think you nailed it with the importance of good leadership and why it matters to be a good leader, not just a leader, not just someone who is successful on the team. There's a lot of great scorers, but if you want to win a championship, you need great leadership. If you want to build a phenomenal franchise, you need great leadership. A lot of times I actually do look at my career through the lens of sports.
All right.
And I think it's just like a great analogy, because there are times where like things are hard. You really just got to grind it out, right? Like you just got to keep your feet moving, right? You can't go down, right? Like you just got to keep your feet moving. And sometimes like it's not your turn to make a play, but be ready when it is your turn to make a play, and you can still be a great leader on the field and sidelines, in the organization, right? Like you're going to have your role to play as a leader. So I don't think leadership is a title. I think leadership is, a reflection of how you see yourself and how you make other people around you better. And you can have great leaders who are on their journey, right? Like you can start off, your role is small. So at Salesforce, for example, they were already thousands of employees. They were global. Their ERGs already had pretty well-established practices and leadership. So, in that role, yes, I was a leader on my team and a leader of the many millions of acquisitions that they were doing. So I was auditing those, but I was also an observer, right? I was learning from other great leaders around me. I have a phenomenal mentor, Sundar, thank you, shout out to you, who has guided me throughout my career and kind of led by example. So, it's someone I appreciate and someone I can emulate in my other roles going forward. And it wasn't until I joined Coinbase where I really had the opportunity to like really be a leader. Because when you're a startup, you're doing it all, right? Like you wear many different hats, and I'm not steadfast about what position I play. They said, today you're the running back, you're doing the hard yards. Today you're blocking for someone. Today you're gonna, be out there as a receiver, and we're gonna draw a play for you, right? There's many different positions that I would have to play. Gave me the opportunity to really lead and grow the organization, and also show other people what it's like to just weather those storms. And 6 years in this, like I've seen the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs. Unfortunately, the hyper growth and then like the rapid scale back. It felt like a cliff. So those moments, continue to develop you as a leader, and they stick with you. But I think that great leadership is is honestly probably even more important in today's world, where we're building technologies that are, hyper speed. And I think what great leadership helps you do is it helps you understand how to drive this car. Not a drag race. It is not just get in the car, all gas, no brakes. I don't care where we're going, we're getting there fast. It is an F1 race. Like you need to be navigating with precision. You need to know when to slow down and turn. You need to know where you're going. There needs to be a direction of this. So I think great leaders also not only have vision, but have a direction that they want to go in, and they can discern what not to do. Sometimes it's what you don't do. And, they're able to direct you. They're able to know, again, speed as well, because the intuition and the default mode for tech is just fast. Mm-hmm. I don't care what you do, just do it fast. Yeah. I don't care where we're going, get there faster. Yeah. Beat so-and-so. Yeah. And you want to make sure that you're actually at a race to the goal and not a race to the bottom.
Yeah, and especially with AI right now, the speed, the race. Ashley, will you permit me one more question before I throw it back to you? But I want you to take us on your own personal crypto awareness journey. I'm guessing that maybe it showed up within Salesforce at one point. I could be wrong. But for you, when did crypto first land on your radar? When did you say, what's going on with this cryptocurrency stuff or this blockchain thing over here? When did that first get on your radar? And then maybe just take us a little bit through that narrative.
The moment I ran the numbers and I stepped in San Francisco and said, this is what I'm paying in rent, this is what I'm earning, and I am not going to get to my goal 7% year over year, right? Like there is no mathematical way where I'm going to really be able to climb out of this particular situation, even if I am making great money. Because again, the cost of living for even someone who's doing well in the area was just continuously rising. Yeah. And the quality was good. It was great. I'm doing fine, but at the same time, it's shrinking, right? Like I'm living with 4 other people in the middle of COVID, right? Like, we're all on top of each other. I'm like, what is going on, guys? It's crazy. So I immediately knew that, but I didn't know where crypto was going to take me. So funny story, I'm glad I actually get a chance to get to this. After that 5-bedroom, 1-bathroom situation, I said, hey, I'm going to up my budget. I'm going to get something really nice. I lived in a 2-bedroom spot with 3 people and a room junior. Which meant
I don't know what a room junior is.
You guys don't know what a room junior is? Oh, you guys haven't been sold the dream. You guys haven't been sold the dream. Here's a room junior for you. It is a partitioned living room with a raised cot where my roommate George would sleep.
Nice.
And George was phenomenal. He was your stereotypical San Francisco coder who had previously lived in a hacker house before joining a Google X company and choosing to sleep in our room junior. Thank you for helping us make rent work, George. That was great. Needed that. And he was constantly talking about crypto. He was excited on Ethereum, excited on Bitcoin, and he was trying to explain to me the theory behind it. He wasn't saying, hey, I'm excited about it because it's an investment vehicle. He's like, this is an emerging technology. It's really, really interesting to dig into from a technology standpoint. Like, I'm really enthused about this. So George and I actually took a shot at a podcast. Right. I would get him a stout. Say, George, you are the expert. For the next hour while you finish the stout, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to learn crypto. And I still have some of our early episodes recorded. So
what was the name of the podcast?
What do we call it? So before that, I had a show called The Foreign Exchange. I was a radio DJ in South Africa. That's a whole nother chapter.
All right.
So that's where I was like, oh, I can do a podcast. Let's do this. What do we call it, George? If you're seeing this, you got to remind me what the title was. But I want to say ETH was about $400, maybe.
Wow. All right.
So George was a visionary. He definitely saw this early, and he saw it for the tech side. And I think there's a lot of people in this ecosystem who were early and saw it for the tech side. They were rewarded for being early. And then now you see it's kind of taken a life of its own, right? It's got big Wall Street kind of involved, and institutions are excited about it. Even nonprofits are excited of using it as a tool. So there's so much more to it. But back in those early days, I was just a curious mind. I was learning, and then the mission of economic freedom really resonated with me, because I was like, if I'm blessed enough to have the opportunity to work at this company early in the foundation, then I can help kind of guide the trajectory of this. And I know we're going to go in X, Y, or Z direction, but I would love to live in a world where it's yes, we do this and we do that. And we're able to help heal some of the divide that we've created unintentionally. I don't think tech intends to create this, but what they can do is intend to balance it. I think anything is good with balance. A diet is good with balance. Mm-hmm. Media is good with balance. Mm-hmm. The tech situation is good with balance. The momentum may say, like, you should maximize, be a maximalist, right? That your fiduciary responsibility is to maximize. And I think that hopefully we start to shift to a world where it's a yes and. Yes, we want to absolutely max out, but we know that we can do some other things as well. So that yes and would be really powerful.
Yeah, and yes and a classic improv trope,
yeah.
right? Which I like that, which is about being positive. It's about being supportive, right? And it's about being kind of light on your feet, and I like that. I like the idea of sort of staying in that space. And real quick, suffice to say, George no longer in Room Junior.
No, George is no longer in Room Junior. George has graduated to probably somewhere in Montana. I think he's living a great life.
All right. Much love to George.
Much love to George.
What are you thinking over there, Ash?
Yeah, on your journey of this yes and, which I would say is probably going to be lifelong for all of us on this journey of bringing this into being, I think, or at least getting more people on board, helping empower more leaders with this type of attitude and philosophy. My experience has been it was very difficult to find other people who actually wanted to practice that philosophy. It was easy to find people to say yes on paper, but oftentimes when decisions were being made, the decisions were very clearly not the yes and decision. Or what was most common was, well, we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. And I kept being like, well, when is later? And at what point does that start to conflict with my own desires as an entrepreneur to solve the problems? And so I think we're in this interesting moment of people who want to see that happen, maybe coming together and saying, maybe it's not later, maybe it's now, and maybe that looks different than what tech has looked like in the past. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective, what might that look like? What types of companies are those that you see coming about that would really excite you? Are they companies? Are they social movements? What exactly is it? And so, yeah, give me some more examples.
A movement starts with movement, and you need people to actually act. You need people to practice, like you said. And practice makes perfect, and you shouldn't be intimidated if you're just getting started in the game and it's not perfect. A lot of times we can feel overwhelmed by the volume of things that are coming our way, the thoughts that we individually don't have enough of an impact to even make a difference, and that might paralyze people from actually acting. So they have that intention of, oh, I would love to do X, Y, or Z, and on paper and in principle, I'm about it, but they are stuck at start. And we just need to make sure that we lower that activation energy for them and give them an opportunity to actually get started and act. And I think, to your point, acting now is crucial because in the world that we live in, it's very reactionary. Something happens, and then you say, oh, we need to fix this, The trajectory of AI happens, and we see whatever is going to play out over these next 2 years or sooner because it's moving faster and faster, and then we react. But what we know we need to do is actually act proactively, because you don't want to get to the cliff and realize that you should have hit the brakes 50 yards ago, right? And if you do get to the cliff, you want to know what is next. You have to have a plan for the what if, right? And I know, there's a lot of people who are, the science is out on climate change, right? Well, what if climate change is actually an existential threat to all people, period? Yeah. Regardless of where you're at, physically in the world, political spectrum, you name it. What are we doing in case that is correct? And I think you just need more people to act preemptively. And also, if you do, reach that situation, naturally the world will react. But you want to make sure that the reaction can be adequate. I think there's a lot of things going on, and we don't want to see a world where we're like, wow, we could have definitely avoided that. We had those conversations up front, and just by inertia, no one chose to do something, and now we're forced to try and react to a really dire situation instead of proactively act. Kind of like your diet. Again, you can wait until some condition, becomes real, or you can take proactive steps to make sure that you don't get there, that you're in a better situation when you get there.
Yeah, and don't set Ashley off. That's also one of her favorite topics, and your health. Balance and being proactive, focused on action. These things are part of a healthy system, whether it's your own personal biological system, the sort of larger ecosystem, right? Is being proactive and staying conscious of balance. Being a writer and really being a journalist at magazines, newspapers, and stuff. And this is the case across the board and has been for history, is sometimes for the individual, at the individual level or at a small group level, being an actionary, being proactive, or you're addressing something preemptively, meaning before it happens, you say, hey, look at this, before it's been product tested or consensus approved, has proven to be quite dangerous sometimes, or alienating. Sometimes the system or the powers that be or the status quo doesn't want you to address things proactively or preemptively. What I found with journalism is it rewards being reactive. I found that I might say something over here, and then it's not really codified or accepted until 5 years later, when I'm already on to the next thing that I'm ahead of the curve on. Hey guys. And that has reached a point of untenability for me personally, which is the system rewards the person who is playing Captain Hindsight, not the person who is, Captain Foresight. And if you're that type of person who's an actionary, or perhaps even on a revolutionary cusp, or you're somebody who's willing to step into a new space or a new sphere, you're often not rewarded.
You're not rewarded, yeah. So you might even be dismissed.
You often are. So there is an opportunity with with really anything, but I think specifically with technology, to take a stand on the actionary side of things, on the proactive side of things. And I think this is why media in general, and I'm not doing your like cliche podcast bro who's like, dude, media, man, because I'd like to also offer the caveat that there's often great stuff. And even on this podcast, we reference articles or things that sort of exist in the media sphere that are positive, and there is good work being done, and certainly things are often broken open in that particular sphere.
Right.
But I think it moves way too slow. So there's an immediacy to this, and there also needs to be a new sort of fix-it immediacy in tech. You know,
Right.
so I just wanted to make that note.
Well, and two things I'm gleaning from this, thank you for sharing more about your background, is like the role of an actionary. I had never heard of that before. I've heard of a ton of visionaries, but I love the description of an actionary, someone who's like, hey, I'm going to do it now. And I think you're completely right with somehow our system has been designed, and maybe we've just kind of drifted here without true consciousness of it, but it's incentives driven. And you're disincentivized to be that early actionary, and you are incentivized to be Captain Hindsight. Captain Hindsight is rewarded. See, I told you guys so. Look at it in hindsight, right? But like, you know, the actionary is almost discouraged because they would be dismissed or ostracized or ignored, right? And a million other things, even though they might be proven right. And they don't want to be proven right. I don't, you know, if you're warning me of something that's very dire, you're like, I don't want us to get there, but this is the trajectory that we're going. The graph is showing me that not only is wealth inequality this, it's growing like this, compounding year over year over year, right? And you know, a million other graphs about the things that are plaguing society now. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, we need more actionaries. We need to find a way to incentivize those actionaries. And if I believe, you know, if I know good standing as a platform, I love what you guys are trying to do to incentivize some of that, right? To like encourage that, to reward that, to acknowledge that, even something as simple as saying like, I see you for that is powerful as well. And I think that there needs to be, again, a balance in the Captain Hindsights and the Captain Foresights.
Yeah, it's okay to look back. It's okay to do an assessment or to do your review. Totally. Hey, how did we get here? We're here now. But I think society needs to aggressively start making a little bit more space for those people who are out front.
Yeah.
I want to ask you just a straightforward question, which is, tell me about your arrival at Coinbase. What was your title and role then and perhaps now? So tell us, tell the audience, what's going on at Coinbase? What's your role? What are you up to?
Cool. Yeah. So the reason that really I was excited about Coinbase is because they were one of the early crypto companies that cared about cybersecurity. My whole background was in security GRC, and I wanted to work for a company that was here in the United States, that was compliant, but was also in this crypto economy. And it was really rare to see a company in that space early on at that stage that really, really cared about security. And I think, you know, Brian obviously had the foresight to say like, hey, without security, we can't build trust. And without trust, like, we're not going to be able to actually build the ecosystem and like, you know, draw a lot of customers and all of that.
Adoption and all.
Exactly. So that was my my foray and I call it my door knocker, right? That was the thing I could knock on the door with. They say, you're great at the security GRC work, come on in. And I was like, cool, like I'm happy to start ground floor. Like let's continue to grind it out. And I was still so unaware to like the venture capital world and the phases of startups and the trajectory that we were on. But, you know, 2 or 3 years later, you know, I was fortunate enough to say that Coinbase had went from a small startup to a public company. So that was such a journey, and a lot of the work that our team did on the trust and risk side really helped solidify the company to be in a position to do all of that. So I was really excited to be like, okay, that was a really impactful contribution to the trajectory of this company at that time. And then after we had IPO'd, we had the opportunity to open up a foundation. So we had started what was dubbed Coinbase Giving, and it was aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So how does blockchain enable new use cases that are addressing clean water or addressing inequity or addressing climate action, things like that? It was a very challenging role because we were so early and there weren't a lot And now there's a lot more innovators in that space, but early on it was harder to find them. I could find 10 DeFi platforms on a BART, but trying to find someone who's building something at the intersection of on-chain climate impact was a little bit harder, but it was so rewarding. It was so rewarding. Years later, now I'm on the policy team, because obviously market conditions and all of that. But that period in my career showed me that that's possible, that's out there, that's currently being done, even if it's not making the headlines. And then that's also the balance that we need to seek in the ecosystem. So we did a great job of kind of encouraging more of that and spurring that in the same way that venture capital helps incentivize people to go out there and start a startup, even if it's treacherous and difficult and we were a foundation that could give grants that will help other people see that there is some incentive to build in this direction and build in the space. And now, I'm continuously, widening my aperture and understanding that there are, venture firms out there that focus on impact and a bunch of other organizations that can support entrepreneurs who are in that space. So I'm hoping to continue to explore that avenue to make sure that we're cognizant about the yes and. Because I'm very confident that we're going to build the best tools for the industrial players at the table, like the institutional players at the table. I know that that's a customer that we are going to serve. And what I want to know and prove is that we can do both.
Yeah, and the institutional players are often the industrial players, right?
Right.
Tell us a little bit about where you had success, where maybe it didn't really work out the way you planned, and maybe go into a little bit of detail, if you can, about some of these different initiatives. You mentioned sort of generally, but what was like the first thing when they were like, hey, dive in, check, can we make this work? Or can we align with this organization on the ground somewhere to amplify or support what they're doing? So maybe just give us a couple of examples if you can.
Yeah. The good and the bad news of it is that it was a blank slate. It is literally a blank Google Doc, and we have the freedom to try and build the framework for the program. So I was one of the founding members, myself, Trent, Harrison, and Dominique, and a few other people. We're kind of like that early core team, and it took a lot of huddles for us to just try and get together and figure out what is the framework that is going to be the structure for like building this in a programmatic and systematic way. And obviously you glean from best practices across the industry, but we already knew that we are a little bit unique because our foundation wanted to focus purely on how is blockchain being used in a unique way to create impact against this framework, sustainable development goals, as well as funding public goods in the crypto ecosystem. So it wouldn't do traditional things outside of that mandate. It wouldn't just give to any nonprofit. It's got to be like kind of crypto first.
It wasn't just philanthropy via crypto.
Right. It was more of like, crypto social impact, venture impact type of mentality than it was just your, traditional philanthropy. And I actually appreciated that challenge because it forces you to actually go find those people and not just kind of accept what's within arm's reach, something that's easily tangible and is going to make an impact. But your responsibility in that seat is to continue to drive the world forward and bring the future closer to the present. That's what our mandate was. My very first grant was a proposal that I wrote with the help of Robbie Greenfield, who was at Emoja at the time. And it was a partnership with Hope for Haiti. And Haiti had just gone through an earthquake and assassination, just tons of turmoil. And traditionally it was like a very, very difficult place to do humanitarian aid. You have, threat of danger, you have threat of fraud, and then you just have people who are truly in need. And thankfully we connected with Skylar, who's the CEO of Hope for Haiti, and we developed this proposal to help, I think, over 150 families in Haiti get access to US dollars via a NFC card, and it uses stable coins. So we would distribute the cards to the community in need through Hope for Haiti, because I think another key piece of this is know your role, right? You don't want the lineman out there trying to catch the passes, right?
That is funny when that happens, though. I mean, linemen can't catch the passes, but like I like a defensive tackle getting an interception. That can be
exactly.
That can be room for entertainment there. All right,
exactly.
Sorry,
I'm not trying to make them not top 10. This ends in a top 10 play. So we knew our role, right? Like we're the tech partners. They understand the dynamics on the ground and how to distribute this aid. So we're helping. We're playing our role. So we provide some of the tech and some of the funding. And just like the vision for the program, distribute these NFC cards to the families. We help the merchants tag all of their inventory on chain as well. Food, water, feminine products, like you name it. All of that is also on a blockchain. And then what that allows us to do is measure in real time the impact of the program. Distribute the funds, they go to the merchant, they buy exactly what they need. It's a non-conditional program. We're not blocking them from getting anything. And we're able to look at the blockchain and say, wow, within 4 days, every single family that we wanted to help went and bought what they needed. And I can prove to the donor class that 99% of the funds were used at these 5 specific merchants for food, water, and for feminine products. And that loop is really powerful because it gives you somewhat of a trust score. The power of the blockchain was that transparency. And then we also learned, there's some second and third order things that were really good. So for the first time, these merchants in Haiti had the opportunity to save securely in US dollars, right? Like a formal savings. Otherwise, it's being a very cash-based economy. Another plight of a cash-based economy is physical security, right? If you're a vendor and all these families have come to you to buy X, Y, or Z, there's someone that's looking to try and take that. So there's greater security that we were able to provide to these merchants in addition to all of that. And now it's a program that we're still talking to Hope for Haiti about today, and hopefully we can continue to iterate on some of the core learnings there. But I think that this potentially proves out why blockchain is a powerful tool for humanitarian aid. And then long story short, it went on to win Grant of the Year. Oh, wow. We are awarded Grants of the Year here in Brooklyn. There's a whole award show, but annual celebration.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So really proud that that was the first one, and carried forward and was actually impactful, and we can say that we've helped some families. So at my house, I have literally a photo hanging up of one of the merchants that we've helped, and hopefully we can do more of that.
Wonderful. Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to ask, about this USAID program defunding that happened last year, and a lot of the criticism of that organization and sort of aid in general in terms of how it's been done, in terms of larger organizations that sort of receive funds, taxpayer dollars, and use those funds mostly for internal operations, and only the stats are maybe 2% makes it to people on the ground. And of course it's very different for every initiative. And I'm curious if you think that this pilot program that you worked on, does that sort of directly address the issues that people are criticizing about aid? And if so, could we maybe see in the future some sort of platform come about that maybe, like you're saying, partners with organizations on the ground and provides a more transparent layer of funding? Yeah, just tell us your thoughts about that.
I am a firm believer that that's where technology also needs to make an impact in making critical aid more efficient and transparent and safe, especially in these really distressed areas where, today's models, they're shipping over a pallet of cash and trying to distribute that and so on and so forth. And, like you said, there's this kind of opaque reality of operations versus impact. And I think that people would feel more comfortable if there were tools that could provide them the trust that this is getting to where it needs to go. Kind of like a gas mileage score, right? Like if you put in 10 gallons worth of gas, you want to make sure that you're getting as much mileage out of that as possible. And you want to be using the most efficient vehicle for all of that. So I do believe that blockchain can be a solution in that. And then you could layer on, other technologies like ZK proofs to also ensure that there's privacy, because there needs to be a balance. It can't just be pure blockchain with, everything fully transparent. You want to be able to provably say within reason that these funds were used for what they needed to be used for. And I think you also need to resist the maximalist instinct of saying 100% of the dollars need to go towards X, Y, and Z, because the reality is that there are operational costs.
Yep.
And even in business, right? Like businesses never has to justify some of these operational costs.
Right.
So this premonition that, any aid needs to be 100% pass through with no operational overhead, period.
Yeah.
I also don't think is the right balance. But I do think the blockchain can be a powerful tool in, a situation like that.
Tell us a little bit about, this is like a little bit inside or, maybe a little technical, but are you just looking at behind the scenes analytics? Is there like a specific software that maybe is even accessible to the public, maybe not? How much is internal? And also, just tell us a little bit about what that technology looks like in terms of the accounting. Is it all on the back end? Is it all behind the scenes? Or is there like a specific tool, maybe within a larger umbrella, that does that accounting? And could that be kind of modeled out? I guess I'm just leaping off your question a little bit more technically.
Great point.
Tell us what you can tell us.
What does a blockchain look like?
Yes.
It looks like a bunch of characters and strings and numbers on a blockchain at the most basic level of just the pure data. So hypothetically, if we were running this on Base, and you could go on Base Scan and you could actually see all the transactions literally in real time, that's the nature of the blockchain. But just that data alone isn't necessarily useful or discernible. So we'd work with a partner, Emoja, in the case for Hope for Haiti, and they had built out a complete dashboard to understand how is this actually being used, and they would actually aggregate all the data. So you would go on and it would look like, let's say, a Salesforce dashboard. It would have, over time, this is the payouts, this is the payments, these are the clusters of merchants where people are going to, and it just essentially makes the data readable and usable so you can actually make decisions. It's like, okay, like what is the velocity of the aid? Okay, well, within 48 hours of distributing the aid, we see that it's gone completely from the population group to the merchants. Okay, like that means they needed it, they used it right away. What did they use it on? Okay, well, we see that 80% was towards food and water, another 20% was towards this other thing, maybe one or two outliers here and there. Okay, cool. Like we can continue to pump resources in this particular way. Are there families that didn't use the aid? Okay, maybe we should follow up with them. Why didn't they use this? And you can't discern that just by looking at either Scan or Base Scan or whatever. You would really need other custom software to be built to help you discern a lot of that data. Especially with AI tools today, you can actually pretty easily build a dashboard to help understand all of that. So you kind of get like a health score for your program. You're running this large scale program. Here's how many participants, here's doing what, and then you have the data to understand what's going on. Otherwise, the data collection process is kind of retroactive, right? You have to go back and you have to ask them, what did you spend it on? When did you spend it? Like you have to ask the right questions instead of have the right data to see what's actually happening. And a lot of times people say one thing, but participate in another way. So you're able to kind of glean, how is it actually working? And what are people saying?
Yeah, it also seems like if we built out an infrastructure that everybody around the world could use, rather than have our money be paid in tax dollars that then goes to some other organization that then finds other organizations to distribute it, there could just be this open infrastructure. Organizations can plug into it. There'd have to be some sort of vetting. But then you can just contribute. I mean, you could even be allotted an amount you need to contribute, right?
Yeah.
If we wanted to go by the taxpayer basis. But the point would be that you could drastically reduce the cost of operating that sort of shared infrastructure. But what are the problems then of creating something like that? Are there problems with there being one technology company who has too much power now, like in the same way that USAID had too much power? And if so, what could we do to mitigate that one company or a few companies having too much power? And of course, we've seen some problems with that in the tech industry.
Yeah. And I can't claim to be an expert on all of this. I'll hop back into the fray very soon and hope to come with better answers. But I do see some friction in like just standardization across like, a global kind of creating some type of global standard, because, if you're administering some of these programs, there's probably some local context that makes this an apple and this other one an orange. So there's some sort of like standardization that needs to happen in addition to just also allowing for the flexibility of like, I'll call it hyperlocal or just like really situationally aware kind of programs where it's like, hey, this situation in Haiti it's a little bit different than what we're seeing elsewhere. And, there are similarities, but, we can use the same infrastructure. And if we want to measure an aggregate outcome, we can absolutely do that. But we need to also kind of understand that, these are kind of unique. I'd say also like quality as well, because certain organizations might have a really strong competency in one area and another organization might not have the same competency. And it doesn't mean that organization still shouldn't do anything because they're not the most maximally efficient, right? But you also want to make sure that you're hitting the same quality bar across each of these programs, and you don't find yourself in a situation where they're maximizing for the metrics. They're kind of gaming the infrastructure. Okay, we got to hit this particular number. All right, let's just do these things and we'll hit that number when it's not quality in a sense.
Like Amazon bot reviews.
Oh, Amazon bot.
Yeah,
I know Amazon
so
bot
they-
reviews.
yeah.
What is Amazon?
What is a bot?
Yes.
Wow, you do work in tech, don't you?
I know. I've been in my bubble. It'd be fun to build a hyper-local Amazon. This is a tangent here, but I'm like, how many times I go on Amazon and I buy something that could be bought at the bodega across the street out of pure convenience? And it's like, it shouldn't be like that. Like there should be a hyper-local Amazon where I know like my dollars are getting contributed back into the local economy. The product is literally right there. It can be delivered faster, in relative terms. And it would also help reduce the impact at, these warehouses. So some guy doesn't have to put it in a box and ship it cross country, and 2 days later it's at my doorstep for me to unbox it, tear down the box and put it back in the recycling bin.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned there's so many things that are interesting about Haiti in terms of its location, in terms of just the problematic weather and, it's sort of, it's very problematic past. And there's so many things that make it interesting and sort of difficult in terms of its own balance and sustainability. This is part of the same sort of note. Bear with me for a minute. Yeah. In one of our internal case studies at Radical Systems, we referenced, it was basically like a UBI test run that ChatGPT put together. They were forecasting the elimination of jobs due to AI, and they ran a pilot program for UBI, correct? And I think they gave a certain amount of people, I think it was $1,000 a month, not crazy.
So they gave them money and not tokens. Sam's trying to give them tokens.
Yeah, right. So the result in reading their case study was sort of like, well, it's nice that for this limited window that they're being afforded this no condition payment. I think it was for like a couple of years. It was like for maybe 2 years. Check out that particular case study. Feel free to check out our case study about that case study, among other things. But basically the general gist of that was sort of like, it kind of helped people, but it wasn't really sustainable. Mm-hmm. And when you're on the ground and you give people who are struggling those resources, again, for that window, it's great that they can fulfill their basic needs. But it just seemed like, and I don't know exactly if they're running a similar program. I'd be interested in looking into that and diving further. But it seems like they were like, it kind of helped, but it wasn't really sustainable. And productivity kind of went down, and initiative kind of went down. And we tried, and again.
And they had a stopping point, after 2 years. We're like, we don't know what happens after 2 years, but you guys have been treading water for a couple of years. And
yeah, so I'd love to check in, and I'm willing to provide some good faith that maybe there's sort of follow-up there. I think they deserve a little bit of credit for giving that a shot. I think they felt some responsibility in terms of pushing AI forward. We're seeing the ongoing elimination of jobs that have come in the wake of ChatGPT kind of,
Are you buying the narrative that like, but there will be more jobs?
I haven't heard anyone even push that narrative. I think this notion that everybody's just going to like become an artist or something, and I do think that as money concentrates concentrates further and further with a smaller and smaller group of individuals, that they do have a responsibility. And we can go after their tax money and we could do this or do that. But I know I don't want to speak for Ashley, but part of what this is like you have to be clear about the channels through which that money is disseminated and transparent about how it's being used, where and how it lands, and people need to engage consensually about that data. I know it's like we could spend all day talking about Haiti. And again,
Right.
there's so many like multivariant dimensions to some of the issues on the ground there. And there's a lot of beauty on the ground there, but like serious challenges with hunger, gang violence. There's so much going on the ground in Haiti. But just from your perspective, this notion of non-conditional payments for whatever sort of window of time. And those are people, again, getting their basic needs, feminine hygiene, water, food, positive. But I also think about how much just general money is swirling within the 1% and just across the world, even with everyday individuals. But I look at Haiti as a place filled with real people, let's be clear, real living human beings who deserve attention and respect.
Right.
But I also do think that it's a very unique case study for all these different reasons. Is it even a sustainable place to live anymore due to the heat, the extreme weather, etc.? But can the money that exists in the crypto sphere be collectively aggregated to solve, to fix complex, multidimensional problems in concentrated locations like Haiti? Meaning, could the global crypto world, the whales, come together through somebody like yourself, through Coinbase, maybe leading the initiative, to actually solve problems on the ground with policing, with safety, with building a sort of bespoke Haiti-driven Amazon-type distribution center with its own vehicles, which creates jobs? Could they build sustainable housing? I mean, could crypto be harnessed to actually sort of create
I hope
infrastructure?
So. I absolutely hope so.
I know that's
that
a lot.
example, I know.
Solve this right
Yes,
now,
okay. Well, the short answer is crypto solves this, obviously. I don't know why do people wouldn't obviously see that. A few things that I'm gleaning there are we live in a world where capital is abundant and it is not dispersed, not even fairly, right? And not even close to equally, right? Like it is aggregated to the top and continuously drifting. And in tech, there's this saying of like configuration drift, right? You know, when I first started years and years ago, there were systems that I built and configs that I had set up that no longer serve today's reality. And the situation has drifted so far. You need to continuously update the system. And I think that's where we're at with, you know, let's say wealth disparity and just some of the systems today that we kind of take for granted that have just created this reality. But the reality is capital is absolutely abundant. Capital is somewhat of a blunt object, though. Like capital can only take you so far. If I could go back to San Francisco and say, what amount of money is it going to take to solve hunger in this city? Someone could give me a number. And there's probably someone within that 7 mile radius that has enough money to fulfill that number. Mm-hmm. So I'd have that capital, but now it's like, what do you do with it after that? And I think that it's building the systems and incentives and structures to put that capital to work so that you see productive change over time that is actually led by people who are doing the work that it takes to create a safe and stable community. And the people that are doing the work to build the housing infrastructure and also get ownership in all of that. So it's not like they are just purely the labor class. If I look here at New York, there's a new building being built every single day. And people walk by the scaffolding all the time, and they know that people are building these modern luxury high-rises, and it is physical work. It is early and late in all types of weather and all types of situations. And we know the people that are going to move into that can afford the $6,000 a month for the 2-bedroom apartment, and that there's going to be a company, a real estate development company that owns that collects the lion's share of all of that for in perpetuity. But really, there's a working class of people who, if they had some equity, could also participate in the upside over time. And they would essentially be rewarded for building this really valuable piece of real estate. And I think that that example can be emulated across a number of other industries as well, where, let's say corporations, like, not to pick on Uber, because I don't hate Uber, but I think it was good when they finally decided to give some equity to some of their drivers, because without the drivers, there is no Uber. Without the content creators, there is no YouTube. YouTube doesn't produce any videos themselves. They accrue billions of dollars of value, and they get to set the take rates, but it's the aggregate work of the creators. And I think that's also another tricky part to solve for. It's really easy to solve for your individual problems. If there's, an issue at my house, let's say like there's, some issue with the trash can or whatever, I'm like, okay, I need to take out the trash because the smelly trash is making my room, terrible. And, I'm the one who's absorbing all the externalities of this. If I go to the common trash room and I treat it like garbage, just throw it in there, and it inconveniences the rest of the people, it's hard for us collectively to all agree to take ownership over that group problem. So then, they'll hire someone to go in and solve all of that. And we're like, yay, like, that great job. Thank you, so-and-so for doing all of that. When in reality, we could all, kind of solve that problem ourselves. We could set rules, but hey guys, just put the trash in the trash can, break down a box. Looking at you, neighbor, break down a box. Okay. So there's kind of like the plight of the commons there, but kind of taking it back to that example, I think crypto can be a tool to rebuild a more modern society. And then the Haiti example, when they went through their earthquakes, they actually lost a lot of their land records. A lot of their land records were destroyed. So if you were a family that lived in that area and had a claim to a house over decades, you no longer actually have the paperwork to prove that you own that. So that's tough, right?
Yeah, and then people come in a predatory capacity.
Exactly. And we're going to see that in our lifetime again, unfortunately.
I'm thinking of Hawaii, too, had some issues, but let's...
100%. Blockchain-based systems can help make land registry more resilient so that you have persistent claim over your property and there's not a single source of failure in that sense. Talking about Hawaii or Southern California that experience these like very acute climate crises, I think there's something that can be done proactively to know how we want to respond when that happens. So in California, there's likely going to be a fire that happens this year. And when that happens, we know what happens next. People rally to raise funds. We try to identify the issue. We obviously put out the fire, and then you have this rebuilding effort. But capital is required. An emergency response is required. What if you could have a climate resilience fund that is proactively funded on chain, and you have a transparent set of protocols and organizations that will be prepared to respond immediately? So you've already done the raise capital phase of this process, and now in a crisis, you are ready to react. And it is essentially not that it's automated, but like you have the capital to react, and you can do all of that. And if there is no climate crisis, you can return all the funds to the donors immediately with the click of a smart contract. Because it says, hey, if the data oracle says there is a fire, you have agreed that you're donating to this cause. This is what you would do anyways when you see the fire happen, and that's gonna create an impact for the local economy and help save people in real time. But if this doesn't happen, which we don't want it to, you're gonna get your money back. It's almost like risk-free in a sense, and you can crowdsource preemptively to respond to certain things in real time.
Yeah, I was just thinking in the advent of there not being some sort of crisis or natural disaster, that same set of resources, that same pool of capital could be driven towards infrastructure projects that are sort of climate adjacent, meaning that's an interesting community center that does workforce training, or this does this, or this does that. So I like that idea of you're lining up potential avenues of investment. You're lining up ventures in case this doesn't happen, and it would be nice if it didn't. Ashley had a contact in New Mexico, and I don't know how in depth we could go, but this is a gentleman who's operating at the state level who is interested in something like this. So this might be an interesting way to sort of combine forces with this gentleman who's looking to do that on the ground in New Mexico. And actually, in one of our earlier podcasts, we spoke about how there's a lot of weird, conflicting things going on the reservations out there, where they have a lot of like sacred protected lands that also simultaneously need a lot of fire prevention infrastructural projects to be initiated that are coming into conflict there. So you have senators, you have people locally on the ground who are trying to do things in a preventative capacity, but funds and politics and bureaucracy are not really aligning. So I just like this idea of tech. When we went to like a fire panel, it was like, the threat level was like in the red for a potential fire, and luckily it rained. But there weren't really any technologists on this panel. And it's like, all right, well, you got the fire chief and you got the gentleman who's in charge of those sort of projects on the res. And again, you have a state senator, you have a more local sort of politician. But it would be cool to see somebody who is interested in harnessing technology and perhaps even blockchain technology to account for some of these projects that need to happen. So we should talk about that a little more. I don't want to.
Yeah, Ashley, don't be gatekeeper. Introduce us to your contacts.
It's happening behind the scenes.
I know.
So they already know you. Don't worry.
Okay, this is great.
I want to ask a question about a lot of these solutions boil down to there needs to be some capital invested to develop the infrastructure that's needed beyond just distributing aid to people who are not able to meet their basic needs, right? Like that's sort of where we've arrived in a lot of our research, is the aid only goes so far in terms of an economic development framework. We have to provide that aid within a context where there's a future, there's a path, there's economic freedom at the end of that road of aid. And providing that aid holistically within that framework will help solve the problem. And that leads to things like, where's the infrastructure? Yet we have a society that right now is doing the opposite of that. It's actively defunding investment in collective infrastructure. And that's not actually me saying it's one party or the other. I think actually people across the spectrum have been going in this direction just economically, saying that, well, let's just concentrate wealth and capital and we won't really worry about collective infrastructure anymore. So if these things are all true, we kind of are left with two options. One is we have to learn how to appeal to this increasingly concentrated group of people to say, hey, we need resources for collective infrastructure. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what are kind of strategies to do that. But there's a second path, which is what you just alluded to in your apartment building, where, well, we could all organize and figure that out ourselves. Or we're in Haiti, we're on the ground. Maybe we have to figure out how to build infrastructure with our time and with the physical resources of the land. So there's also this opportunity to do things alternatively. I believe probably we need to learn to do both of these things.
Yes.
I think we don't really know how to do the other one, and that's what I've been most interested in my work, but also have found a lot of problems in that way as well. But yes, I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those, the alternative paths, but also how do we appeal to this donor class?
Yes, and the mantra is yes and. I think we absolutely do need to do both. And I'm curious which one in your head we need to do more of. Like, where are we failing? Are we not appealing to that class, or are we not doing the grassroots stuff? Because I have comments on both, and I think there's room for improvement in both. But I'm curious your answer, and then I'm going to dive into my answer.
I don't know if you recall where maybe about a year and a half ago, before Elon had his like weird Doge moment and what a bunch of other weird moments.
Do you have a chainsaw in
here? There was a gentleman who I think dropped on Twitter/X and said, hey, Elon, you could cut a check that could solve hunger. It would cost blah, blah, blah. What was it, like $6 billion, I think was the number. But this guy who I don't know his name, but I'll find it and I'll throw it up here when I find it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Elon sold stock and cut this guy a check. I could be wrong. I'll look into that. That could be nonsense. But there was a guy who said, this number will solve hunger in this particular region. I wasn't 100% sure where it was. I think it was Europe,
I vaguely recall this.
Do you remember this?
Is this the World Hunger Guy? Well, I mean, not the World Hunger Guy.
It was something like that. I'll look into that. But this guy uses social media to connect with a guy who, if he wasn't already on his way to becoming like the world's richest man, and says, you could cut a check. And I believe Elon sold stock and cut a check.
And did he do it as a challenge to say, here's the capital, what?
Well, he first said, you got to show me the spreadsheet at how you arrived at this number and how it's going to land. If you do that, I'll take a look and we'll see what's up. And from what I understand, this guy did that. And yet, I've heard nothing since.
Right.
Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything?
I see a lot of hungry people.
There's a lot of hungry people. I haven't heard anything. And by the way, I know there's a South African thing here. We just spoke to this guy, Alan Brody, who runs South Africa Harvest, which is like a food rescue, food distribution program. I think they're the second largest food rescue and distribution program in South Africa. So this guy's doing a lot of work. Nice. And if you are one of these 1%ers who want to do work and you want to address hunger, the South Africa Harvest guy is not a bad guy to speak to. And he's building off all sorts of interesting models in Australia. There's like Oz Harvest and also France, who has it's like La Garoye, which is like a law that you're not allowed to waste food in France. Sorry, French people everywhere for that horrible pronunciation, but you'll see more in that episode. So we are speaking to individuals like this. Should the situation arise where some huge whale with a lot of money wants to make a donation like that, and we could follow up journalistically and make sure that is landing. I just wanted to make this note that there was this discourse between this guy who made a big kerfuffle about this.
He's like, you could do this. And he's like, I'll do it.
So I'm curious. I'll look more into that and I'll share information about that. I'd love to talk to that guy potentially to see what happened.
It's a lot of pressure, $6 billion in your bank account, and then like you have to execute the plan.
Right. And yet I haven't heard anything about this. I haven't heard any follow-up. So who knows? Maybe that money never arrived. Maybe it was dead in the water. Maybe it never happened. But from what I understand, Elon sold stock and cut a check to this guy.
And I think that's also important as well, because that's where I want to kind of take it, is that we do absolutely need to engage those people that have, I'll call it untouchable wealth. There'll never be a situation where through them overextending on the risk curve or their investments or whatever, that they fall on hard times, that they fall to the floor. Mm-hmm. And what we see in America is that the floor is continuously, unfortunately, falling. It's falling. Yeah. And what we want to do is continue to raise the floor, at least with those basic things, right? You should have dignified opportunity and in housing and not go hungry and things like that, especially if there's a number to it that you can easily just say, hey, for $6 billion, we could solve this. And I think what the story kind of gleans is that it's not as easy as just $6 billion is the number and you can, check out and boom, like world hunger is solved. And there's, a network of people and distribution and sustainability that you kind of need to consider to really like solve it over time, because like numbers are very like, firm, finite, concrete, point in time, capital allocation. Kind of like when, a startup is raising capital. They said, hey, it's going to take $6 million to, hire these engineers and get these resources, It's like, cool. Like you've been funded day one. How long until this vision comes true? And like, what is the work required to do that? And what roadblocks are you going to face on your journey to get there? And I think that, that's another challenge that needs to be solved. But the fact that there are leaders out there like Elon who have the capital to invest in someone's vision for how to solve this problem, I think is powerful. And if we have more people that have a vision for how to solve this problem and more billionaires that are willing to invest in that, because to the billionaire, it's not going to cost them anything, right? There's no material cost. Yeah. They're like, why would I not let this community try and solve this problem? Because this problem affects all of us, and it manifests in the cities that we live in. And I have another tangent about why I love New York and why I love the New York City subways, but I can go on that later. But yeah, I think the moral of the story is like, yes, we absolutely need to engage with that class of people as well. because they might be willing to dedicate a big or small portion of their wealth to like systemically solving the problems, in addition to the philanthropy that I'm sure they already do, and the ways that they contribute their time and the resources, their network, and But there needs to be another layer here where they're willing to take a 1 in 100 risk on someone who's trying to solve world hunger, in the same way that they're trying to take a 1 in 100 risk on someone who's going to make the next DeFi platform.
I think you made a good point there. I think that class is more interested in someone who has a systemic solution than getting 100 people asking them to donate to their food bank. And so I think what you're saying is they're maybe waiting, and maybe we haven't really gotten there in society yet, for a group of people that say, hey, I actually have a systemic solution to social issues. Now, some of these things are going to fail, but there could be more investment collectively. In the same way that we look at like Silicon Valley and tech founders, we could start to look at people who are trying to solve these social issues systemically.
Right. And I think another problem that, another Silicon Valley problem, I'll just not to pick on Silicon Valley here, but an issue that I see is that there's thousands of people willing to fund the next 100x opportunity, but there's not enough people that's willing to fund the 5x or the 10x. And it creates this hollowing out where they're willing to fail 100 times on that 100x opportunity to go build, the next Facebook or whatever it may be. And then somewhere in the middle, we're losing the tried and true, hey, this is gonna be a solution that actually works and it can scale 5x, 10x. You'll get some returns if that's what you're really in it for. You'll get some returns, but it's not going to be the next 100x. Those are so rare. Those are the unicorns. And there's already a pool of people that are funding that. You need people who are willing to take the risk on the 5 and the 10x to also balance out this end of the spectrum as well. You can't have this unequal growth. Kind of like you got plants here, right? And they're just, one side is getting all the sunlight, and next thing you know, the entire plant is leaning towards that. You make sure that you're like leveling that out and like, distributing the nurture all around.
Yeah, we've almost kind of come full circle on this notion of engagement too, and I think you have to engage the billionaire. By the way, we're on the road to some trillionaires, right? Like there's some companies that have gone over
maybe a $1
trillion
company.
market cap and all this kind of stuff, right? So the ire for the billionaires, get ready for the trillionaires, because they're not far off. So if you're mad at billionaires, your steam's going to be coming out of you.
I'm not the monster anymore. Look at this guy over here.
Yeah, billionaire. Look at this guy. All right, so that's coming. But the Elon chainsaw thing, and we believe in nuance on here. We don't think everything is so this or that, right? I do think that there was a period sort of pre-COVID, things started in crypto too, that sort of like late 21 getting into 22 kind of dipped down. Now a lot of stuff's kind of coming back a little bit, but sort of a general economy took a turn maybe like early 2023, and it's kind of been like for a little bit. But Elon rolls into Twitter, and I had some friends who did sort of like social justice work at Twitter, or they were like an interesting art person at Twitter, things that weren't necessarily the sort of meat and potatoes, essential everyday coding, engineering.
They weren't hardcore.
And they were passionate about what they did, but Elon clearly did not deem them essential to, number one, the bottom line, to what he felt was his goal, which was clearly, moving politics around and other things. And we can debate how genuine he was about free speech versus this or that or whatever. But he got rid of a lot of people. At the end of 2024, early 2025, the beginning of this year, there was a lot of layoffs at Meta. Originally, when they were debating laying off, I think about like 1,500 people, they were like, well, we're not going to get rid of any of our like star performers, our like A performers. Right. And many of them that were deemed A performers in performance reviews and stuff were nevertheless let go. Right?
It's not about performance.
So you let go X amount of people, and that's a big number. That amount of people, there's 1,500 people who are like, look, Mom, I got that tech job and the tech passport stamped. But did they get that job? Right.
Right.
And then just a couple months perhaps even just weeks after laying off these individuals, Zuckerberg takes a fleet of super yachts to Norway for some extended vacation that costs millions and millions of dollars. So the yachts themselves, this fleet of yachts, and he had to get all sorts of like government clearances to do this and stuff like that. So you're talking about like a multi-million
gaudy amount of yachts,
like some like Nebuchadnezzar or so, like some epic king of old, like So you have this guy who's a leader. And there are some things about Zuckerberg, a young guy, holding on to that company and steering that company. He's made a lot of boneheaded moves, a lot of, I think, even potentially malicious, if not, moves that were drowning in their own negligence, to be generous, possibly. But there are things in terms of this guy being a leader of this organization that I do find admirable, right? Mm-hmm. He could have sold, he could have done this, he could have done that. And I got a lot of problems there too. But anyway, I just want to speak to leadership and optics and this notion that you lay off 1,500 high-performing people that you, of your own admission, or at least your staff in performance reviews, said these people are high performers. You lay these people off, and you said you wouldn't lay off high performers. And then you take your demigod fleet of super yachts on an extended vacation. Or there's a bunch of fires in Hawaii and, you cut, yes, a substantial check, substantial in terms of what I could cut a check or donate to fire relief in Hawaii. But then you basically buy the better part of an entire Hawaiian island to build your super bunker or whatever, know? So I'm just saying, like, where is the responsibility? And we're not like a capitalism bashing show here. I believe a lot of things in the free market, and I think people building a company or building platforms, you build it becomes successful. I do think to some degree you should reap the rewards of that,
right?
But there just comes a point where you're like, do you have a responsibility to your employees, and even beyond employees? Do you have a responsibility to the economy? Do you have a responsibility to this country? Do you have a responsibility to the world? Do you have a responsibility to the natural world? Do you have a responsibility to just the existential ether that exists in the world, or how you're perceived? I just look at that. I looked at that fleet of super yachts going into Norway and all the sort of like legal gerrymandering that was necessary to do that, coming on the heels of firing all these people.
Right.
And I just think about, like, where do those people go? And
those are real people that put in the work day in and day out at Meta's headquarters, were high performers, had a hand in the success of the organization, but they didn't have the lion's share of the equity, right? They don't accrue wealth at the same rate. So the collective benefit of their labor continues to accrue to the top and rich. And I'm not also bashing this. It's like, this is the system as it's structured. Mm-hmm. And also, as heavy as the head that wears a crown, right? Like, I don't envy the position that some of these people are in. It's not easy, especially when you're running a business and you have like a fiduciary responsibility to do, quote unquote, what's best for the business. It is shareholder capitalism. It is not stakeholders. And unfortunately, it lends itself to that instinctual maximalization of like, okay, what is as lean as possible? And it happened all throughout tech. We could pick on the top guys. Not that I don't want to pick on them, because I can, we can pick on tech, but it happened all throughout tech. And it's like, you can do what you need to do to make it as lean as possible to get through that hard time. And then I'm sure he compartmentalized it and said, well, I'm rich. I've got the mega yachts. I've got the fleets. So, off to the Riviera we go, right? Mm-hmm. Not a good look, in my opinion. And did they also spin down their, I know there's a Chan Zuckerberg initiative in the hospital and all of that, not to veer off, but I don't know if that still persists today. But to your point of like, do you have a responsibility? I feel like, as a founder in America who has enjoyed all of the benefits that we can reap from the systems that we've built, you have to have a great appreciation for what we have here. Because especially when you go to other countries and you see that they don't have that, you realize that this is worth fighting for. And sometimes, it's not your job, but you can be a responsible party in solving some of that and alleviating some of the downside there and helping the world play defense for a very low cost, right? Like, it's not going to really cost him much of anything. You can afford to lose one of those yachts and save some employees or help, the local economy in some way,
or reallocate that high level tech labor to other ventures. What I'm just saying is like, all right, Meta stock must go up, right? And I got some problems with that. I think a lot of people have problems with that. Let me just do a real brief aside. There was a Texas lawmaker who did a town hall a day or two ago, and he was saying not every job deserves to pay a living wage, and the crowd got really angry, right? And I do think that there is some notion that, and truth to the notion, and I'm sorry for fired up young people especially to hear this, and I'm being a little brutal here, which is there does need to be some correlation to the amount of income you produce versus what you get paid. There is a correlation there. There is a real world correlation between what you're producing, what sort of profit you're responsible for within an organization, and what you're being paid. It's not just fluffy make-believe. What you produce is often commensurate with what you're paid, right?
Right.
This is just something people got to get real about, and it's unfortunate. But when you have conversations about, hey, everybody deserves this or everybody deserves that, you have to be realistic about what you're producing. And that's rough. I don't think anybody should starve or be homeless. And I certainly think that there's enough tax dollars floating out there, more tax dollars that we could procure to raise that bar so people can have their basic resources met. So I want to join you in a place of common sense and rationality, and not just sort of be pounding the everybody does. It's there's some realities to the world and realities within the capital market. I guess what I'm saying is, and this is sort of in line with what we're talking about, which is, okay, Meta stock needs to go up. Your board is all saying, hey, we gotta lighten the load.
Don't slip.
And we gotta be lean here. All right. Well, that means we're firing 1,500 people who are A-level performers, right? Okay. My thing is, are we so devoid of ingenuity? Are we bankrupt in terms of understanding how we can use capitalistic models to, at some point, generate revenue, right? Or to bring in income? Can these people be reallocated in a capacity that allows them to continue to do what they do to some degree, but maybe launch new initiatives? Or, so I'm just saying there's just such this blunt,
exactly, a maximalistic version of capitalism. There could be more compassionate capitalism that actually allows for them to, because they're A performers, right?
And I'm sure they get their severance, and I'm sure to some degree they're looked out for, and to some degree that's probably substantial. And I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No,
but I'm throwing it right back to you. But there's so many interesting ways where these individuals can slide into roles like yourself, where you're not such an outlier to some degree in terms of this impact role you play at a technology company.
Right.
Essentially, it's how could these people move into roles where maybe they're still under a Meta umbrella, but maybe they're allocated as consultants at the state level, at national levels, to play a role like you play.
It's not an email where it's sorry, you are dismissed, and you're just wait, what? What's going on?
So I know that's a lot, and I don't expect you to solve every problem here. But
yeah, Ashley, before I dive in, I'm curious if you have thoughts on this as well, because I've actually obviously lived through the ebbs and the flows and worked at a tech company and know what that's like. And
that's why I'm throwing it at you. I'm not sort of arbitrarily just complaining, but you going through that Silicon Valley, that Bay Area, and moving into an impact space. It's can we start moving people with these high-level skill sets into the impact space? And do companies perhaps have a responsibility to essentially build out more robust impact components to their organizations.
Yeah, I'd like to see it more as their impact investments. So I would prefer that Zuckerberg allocates more money, or companies, to investment in initiatives rather than they all be under the umbrella, because I think we've seen a lot of problems with like the concentration of those or the resources at those companies. So I think the request is like, rather than spend all of your money on like getting more of these yachts, why can't you, if you need to lay off employees because you really don't need to have that many people working there because you're more efficient now, can you take some of the resources that you have and invest them back? And if you don't want to give out aid, you want to give it out in a systemically impactful way, then you can give it out as like an impact investment. I think that's the culture that we'd like to see more of.
Yeah. And to that point, I completely agree on like more impact investing, and also like reallocating them to like new ventures as well. Cause like these startups are all about like, what's the next new thing? What's the next new product? What's the next new frontier? Where else should we be building? You already have the talent there. Like you have a lot of human capital that knows your systems and like knows how to work across organizations and can execute at a really high level. And, you know, I think although there may be the responsibility, is there the incentive for that? And I think, unfortunately, right, the capital markets are very blunt in the sense that it's like, it is number go up and you are kind of judged on a quarterly basis. I think another plight of our capitalistic system is like the need to deliver quarter over quarter, when really like the game is won over a year or 5 years or whatever, right? Like you need that long vision. But if you're constantly beholden to like, what are we doing next quarter, right? Like you're not rewarded for, you know, a 2-year plan in Wall Street terms. You're rewarded for, did you hit some Wall Street analysts, you know, expectations per share on,
right,
you know, a quarterly basis. And I think that's another reality of how treacherous it is to be, be a public company. Again, I don't envy people who are in that situation, because it is not easy. And it's almost like, careful what you're good at, because if you knock it out of the park as a startup and you now are a publicly traded company, well, here you go. You're in the big leagues. I would love to see more reallocation of human capital and like directing them towards things that have those positive externalities. And even if that organization doesn't exist within Meta, I wish there was an organization that had the capital to fairly pay these A performers to go do that work, because that work might not be in line with the mission at Meta, Salesforce, Twitter, you name it, but that's still valuable work that needs to get done. And if you had the capital, then you would have a percentage of these people who say, I choose to work on projects, even if it's like a fellowship or something, at this organization. So you'd have a collection of the best talent. Hey, everyone who was laid off from these particular companies, you have the opportunity to come together and work on a project here in the Bay Area that's impacting whatever issue that you really care about, and you're going to be compensated fairly. Maybe you don't get the same tech salary, but it's not nothing, and we have the capital to do this work because someone, our 1%er who's listening out there, deems this valuable and has capitalized it, and now we can like help draw in the talent and organize that talent to actually work on certain things that are good for the economy. And I think the other part of just the markets that's unfortunate is that they see in black and white, or really like red and green. They don't have the full color spectrum. It's not that capitalism wants to create, the real world divides that we see and the plight of the everyday person, but it rewards margin and it rewards growth. And it is somewhat colorblind or apathetic to everything outside of that spectrum, because things get distilled into quantifiable measures. What is your OPEX? What is your quarterly returns on X, Y, or Z products? What acquisitions have you made? What are you doing in R&D? Like, where could you get leaner? A company of this category trades at 4x earnings per share on so therefore the market values you at this. And like, that's the game that they play. They're playing that checkers. They're not playing chess. They don't see it in a different way. And I think that's unfortunate, but the reality of the situation. And then obviously these CEOs have some fiduciary responsibility to say, oh man, we're in the heat of the race, and what we have to do in X, Y, or Z situation is make this move so the market rewards that move. I don't agree with it. I don't like it at all.
Yeah. And I know I threw a lot at you there, and that response was fantastic. So thank you. This is where I check in on everybody and see how everybody's doing. But I thought maybe we could kind of start rounding it down a little bit. And again, thank you so much for sort of fielding some of this. I kind of want to ask a question for the two of you. I want to see the two of you vibe a little bit, which is you just both met down in DC for a little bit, as you mentioned earlier. And what were some of the takeaways of this recent trip that you can discuss and maybe share with the audience in terms of what are some of the legislative moves currently around crypto? What's the sort of Coinbase perspective on things as it stands? And what are you kind of excited about, or what came out of this recent trip down to DC?
Awesome. I will go second.
All right, sure.
Okay, I'll go second.
I'll tell you from my perspective, because I'm more of the layman's person, if you will, and then you can go into more detail. But my experience with the sort of the Stand with Crypto initiative is there's been some recent movement to pass legislation that would make the different types of tokens in the space have a pathway of launching and going to market. So that's called the Clarity Act. And that helps define how a project, a protocol, a company can take some of its value and distribute that with its network of users, participants, customers in various ways. And this has like been talked a lot about in crypto, or like the ownership economy, kind of the Uber example that we gave earlier. Could there be technological ways to make it easier for people to participate in ownership of these networks or systems and the value that they're helping to create with them? So crypto has a lot of promises of what it can do, but without regulation, there hasn't been a lot of innovation on that front. At least that's the argument by the space, that without this regulation, we're not really seeing a lot of people come forward with models that help distribute value more equitably. So that was one of the pieces of legislation, which I don't think has been passed yet, but is in the process. So
Is in process, and had a very strong bipartisan vote, which is very rare in DC today. So that's something I'm really proud of as well. Yeah, exactly. Like there's work to be done across the aisle, and instead of bipartisan, I like to consider it nonpartisan. It's like a technology that deserves clear regulations here in the United States. And there's been a years long and well-documented struggle of people who want to build in this space. And unfortunately, without the clarity, sometimes clarity pun intended, I guess, they've faced really dire consequence. And they never intentionally meant to cross an invisible line, but they want to know what are the rules so we can continue to innovate in this space, because we see the promise of digital assets and blockchain technology and, the opportunity to actually allow people to earn for their contribution in a way that's more equitable. So I think that it's just like an old system or an old framework and a new technology, and there's been a clash there. In the middle, obviously, there's been a ton of enforcement actions. But now, because of the momentum and the ability to organize and really engage across, all 50 states, we've made it clear that there are everyday people who participate in the crypto ecosystem or use crypto or care about this issue, and they want Congress to act. And we have a responsibility to act sooner than later, because without regulatory clarity, you don't have the consumer protections that you need in the space. You see a lot of innovation move offshore, but the activity is still going to happen. Crypto is here. Crypto is going to stay here. And I know crypto is, somewhat of a, for some people, it's a word that draws a lot of emotion. And for me, from the cybersecurity background, crypto had always meant cryptography. So it was never a scary word. It was always just software to me. And I know, in my time, working in this, and I talked to a number of senators and members of Congress and staffers, the word crypto to them can evoke a lot of other emotions because they've seen X, Y, or Z headlines, they've heard about whatever it may be. And I think that what we've done that's most impactful is to humanize the industry. We bring people who are actually building this in their districts to talk about what they're building, why it matters, and why just having clear rules matters a lot. And it's been literally years and years of work, but it's been extremely rewarding to try and come to this moment where hopefully by end of year, we can actually see the Senate vote on the Clarity Act and really enshrine this into law in a way that isn't partisan and also gives innovators in the United States the clarity to build blockchain-based services. And then, my what's next to that is, now that we've got that, what do we choose to build, right? Because that's not the finish line. That's actually the starting line. But I'm really proud of how we've organized and the meetings that we've been able to go to and like really articulate what is this technology, why does it matter to members, and members are able to see that their own constituents care about this. Again, I think that there were a lot of people who became civically engaged. This was their front door to get civically engaged. Either they were crypto enthusiasts or they see it as a issue that is kind of like a proxy to innovation in America overall. And I hope that those people stay engaged, because there's a long list of things that members of Congress actually have to care about. So when you're walking the halls, you're there with the people who are advocating for the climate, who are advocating for healthcare, who are advocating for housing, who are advocating for crypto, who are advocating for you name it. You all have that equal 30-minute time slot. So right after they're done with us, they're going to talk to someone from one of those other groups. They have a million other things to prioritize, but I'm very proud of the progress that we've seen so far.
And congrats on that progress and that work. I have like 2 rapid fire questions, Ashley. You want to jump in front of those ones?
Go for it.
All right, so here they are. Number
Ready.
1, I think when people hear about crypto, it's like crypto's over here, and then people hear about AI and it's like AI is over here. Is there, from your perspective or what you've seen, an intermingling, a synergy, or what's happening with crypto and artificial intelligence as these 2 schools of technology or spheres, realms, spaces? Are they intermingling? And then my second or last question that I have at the top of the head, and thank you so much for your time so far. I heard you're also doing work domestically, or perhaps even here in New York City, with some stuff. So that first question, what's going on with crypto and AI? Are they bedfellows? Are they enemies? Or what's going on there?
They stole our swag. We were the original hype machine, right? Like everyone was excited about crypto until they found AI, and then they like just left us.
Yes.
So there were, funny enough, you talk about Silicon Valley. There were a lot of people who were starting the next Web3 project. The moment AI came up as a wave, they were all starting the next AI project. These 2 emerging technologies actually do need each other. In the training of these AI models, what's really important is having kind of observability and verifiability into like how are they arriving at these conclusions. It's like really essential to help researchers understand what's going on here. And similar to the example that we used earlier, where with blockchain you can have all the data there, the intersection of blockchain and AI could mean that we have the tools to really understand what's happening when we're training these large language models. That's probably my depth of understanding of the intersection there.
I like that.
But there's also other really important use cases as well, because crypto and cryptography can be used to verify the authenticity of content online. Nowadays, it's really, really easy to fake anything with AI. And blockchain helps verify what is real and what is fake, and it can prove authenticity and provenance and so on and so forth. So I think it's going to be crucial that we have a blockchain-based internet going forward, so we can actually verify the data that's being, not even the data, like the content that's really being posted all over the internet, because the content has an impact as well. You see a message from X, Y, or Z person. Is this real? Is this fake? Is this AI generated? Is it not? Very hard to discern. With blockchain, you can provide a digital signature, and you can do a lot with provenance of the content itself to understand and prove, is it fake or is it not? And is this authorized or not?
Are there people at Coinbase working on this currently? From what you could see, or
I'd say there are people at Coinbase that are working at the intersection of AI and crypto. It's not that we're building like a platform specifically for like combating deepfakes, but there are other founders that are using Base as a blockchain to build their tooling for all of that. So yeah, I'd say we're definitely working at the intersection of crypto and AI, but we're not necessarily building that one particular product. There's going to be other founders out there who were
Mm-hmm.
building that,
Mm-hmm.
and we stuck pretty core to, like we're serving the creators, we're serving the financial industry, and building infrastructure for other creators to go build those really cool use cases.
Okay.
But we do use AI. We use crypto.
Fair enough. And, we might have some people on, and even our venture capital studio are talking to some people working at that sort of intersection, if you will. And I do think that's an exciting place, and sort of interesting that, we mentioned earlier, crypto constantly looking for adoption, integration, use cases, and how AI might help to calcify a major use case and sort of verification, stuff like that. It's kind of interesting.
Exactly. And like you said, a lot of people are like, what are the crypto use cases? This can be a very, very important foundational use case for crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, everyone knows how to go on to ChatGPT and prompt something, and it feels usable, right? But it's also kind of like usable at the playful level.
Mm-hmm.
But like having a system for ground truth and like kind of really understanding is this real, is this fake, is a really powerful foundational system that will prevent a lot of bad things in the future. If a bunch of AI generated content is out there and spreading misinformation and really just causing a paralyzing amount of confusion from people. So
Cool. And what's popping with some of your local initiatives?
really excited that we're getting ready to announce. I don't know when this podcast is going to launch, but hopefully we've already kind of announced it. We want to do a program here in New York City, in Harlem, in the South Bronx, using USDC. Now that, thanks to the Genius Act, there's federal law around the issuance of stablecoins, and we actually want to run a project with Give Directly, which is a nonprofit based here. We want to do a on-chain cash aid relief program with the goal of helping to alleviate poverty and also increase wealth opportunities. And they've run this in a traditional sense without crypto beforehand in, I want to say, Atlanta, Georgia. It was called the In Her Hands Project, where they distributed, similar to UBI, distributed monthly payments to women in need, and then they issued another lump sum payment halfway through the program. And their thesis was the monthly payments obviously help with the day-to-day things that people need to just kind of get by. But in order to actually positively impact the plight that they were in, you need a lump sum, because then that increases your time preference. You're actually able to pay down some debt and get out of this like cycle, this tread water cycle, and you're actually able to kind of advance economically, not just enough to stay afloat where you're at. So we want to try that here in the United States and in New York, specifically in the South Bronx and Harlem, where you see a majority of the population is earning below the median income. You see higher rates of financial exclusion. I saw a stat the other day on the local news that said people in the Bronx pay up to 80% of their income in rent. Just insane.
Yeah, it's too much.
Insane. And at other boroughs, it's roughly 50 to 45%. So, with this lump sum, with this overall experiment, not only do we want to use blockchain to transparently observe, how is the program going and efficiently distribute, the funds and all of that, but we also, Give Directly kind of leading as the community, the community touch point, see if the lump sum model will actually alleviate some of the issues that they're facing. So does it increase housing security? Does it increase food security? Are people more likely to invest in their education now that they have enough to actually make that long-term investment? And an allusion to the earlier conversation about the stock market and quarter over quarter mentality, if you can take someone's time preference to 1 month to 4 months, 6 months, or whatever, then you have the ability to really make investments that pay off long term and not just month over month.
Yeah, no, I like that idea of the lump sum. This gives people a little bit of extra breathing room too, right? I like that, and that was the pushback between these like memes going around, which is you give these people $600 and you give these people $600, and this person invests it and this person spends it in a week. The obvious caveat there is this person needs resources now and these people do not. So that lump sum helps to ameliorate that issue where this person can perhaps be a little bit more discerning or sort of introduce more options in terms of what's being done with that, right? It's not just paying rent or food, water, or, it's actually maybe getting that car fixed or buying that yearly subway pass, which is just something they don't got to worry about or whatever. So I like the notion of that lump sum and some of the stuff that we looked at, and I missed that Atlanta one. I'll check that one out too that you mentioned. That lump sum element as opposed to just a trickling out steady non-conditional payment.
Here's enough to tread water. We'll see you next month.
Yeah. So best of luck with that. And I guess I have one little tag there. Doing a thing in New York, do you have an eye on what mayor might be the mayor and whether or not they're kind of crypto friendly, or do you have any thoughts on just that, what's bubbling up with this mayoral race that we'll see in the fall?
Yeah, I feel like obviously like the mayoral race in New York has garnered national attention. So, as we get closer to election day, the story will continue to develop. Current incumbent Mayor Adams has been very vocally pro-crypto in the sense that he has a vision for how the technology can benefit the city through a number of different ways and create more efficiencies and all of that. So that's exciting. And I don't think Zoran has actually expressed how he feels about it, but I think in principle, right, it implemented the correct way. There's a reason for him to be excited about what this could mean for the city as well. So, I'm excited to see, both candidates flip their cards and see where they're at on this. And I'm hoping that they're both pro crypto, pro innovation, and all of that. But even still, like, Zoran, he ran on housing. And I think that there's an argument to be made, or like there needs to be more proof of work on how crypto is actually beneficial for all these other things that are top of mind for people: affordability, housing, food security, like you name it. If we can get the tools and the, an evidence-backed situation that argues why this is good for all those other things, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be interested in all of that.
Cool. Thank you. Well, Ashley, I could keep going. And thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Do you have anything else,
No,
Ashley?
I don't, but thank you so much, Darin. And I look forward to following up on how these how the pilot program goes with Give Directly, and maybe we'll have a follow-up then. Yeah,
I'm so excited for this. Thank you guys for having me on the pod.
Yeah, and politics for you in the future, you could see a little something, or you're just crushing it in the private realm.
I'm a duck. I'm over here, just like I'm on the water. I'm paddling.
Well, I would love to see politicians not just here at the New York level or even at the national level, but I could see yourself, liaising with other countries who have these different relationships with cryptocurrencies, whether in South America and Europe, across the world.
Can I tell one last story?
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. Because this is another project that I'm really proud of that was during the Impact Days, funded by this. It was in El Salvador, funny enough. They had famously, actually, the starter of Bitcoin Beach, El Zante, in El Salvador, had received probably a donation from a whale, and the mandate to create a circular economy there in El Zante. So if you go there today, they're very famously pro Bitcoin. They use Bitcoin all over. And we had funded a grant with a nonprofit that actually 3D prints homes in El Salvador and Mexico. And this nonprofit actually had gone through Y Combinator, so they check all the tech boxes, right? And they do it in like such a really cool and innovative way. They actually work with the community to help design the homes. And they build these like really nice homes for the community. And how does this connect to crypto? Well, in this particular area of San Salvador and El Zante, people live very far from traditional financial infrastructure. They're traditionally unbanked. Across El Salvador, you see a really high employment rate. You see, let's say 90+%. People who are working in a cash economy, they own tienda, they are farmers, they're construction workers, you name it, they have cash. But because they don't have access to a mortgage, they can't actually like build the type of formal housing that you and I enjoy every day. So you see like these kind of informally organized houses where once they have enough money, they'll go, buy another wing of the house. So they'll kind of expand here and there, but there's not like the traditional methods that that we appreciate here in the US. And you see this all over. So when I was in South Africa, it was a very similar story. So I was like, okay, this is actually a very widespread problem that's kind of hiding in plain sight. These people have cash. They typically would be credible if they had the opportunity to get a mortgage and, create their home. So we've gone in, we've 3D printed these homes at a very low cost with this nonprofit partner, and they're named New Story. We built this community, and then they actually repay their home, they pay their mortgage with Bitcoin. And what that does, it gives them a digital way to pay immediately, and it builds like an on-chain credit score. So we can tell the housing authority in El Salvador, in El Zante for this, in this example, that this family has been paying on time for the past 12 months for their home, and it's an affordable rate for them, but now they actually have decent housing. It's a 2-bedroom with a bathroom inside. The home is actually designed where the windows are kind of at waist level, so you can actually also convert that living room into like a storefront, like a little tienda, so you can serve food out the window. People can come inside. They actually there's commerce that happens there as well. So it's kind of like the intersection of economic development and stable housing and just like on-chain payments. And it wouldn't be able to be done had it not been for some digital financial infrastructure, because the physical financial infrastructure is just, an hour away. So now they have a stable home. Now you can see them actually investing in their education. There's a layer of Bitcoin education that goes into all of this as well. So, they're learning about really technical concepts and skills and, the philosophy of money and so on and so forth. So it's a way that there's so many, second and third order effects to all of this, right? Like they have stable housing, they're learning a, futuristic skill, and you see positive outcomes there. It's like they have better health, better financial and physical security. And there's so many other things that kind of get layered on top of that.
That's amazing. And how many of these homes, just roughly in your, do you think have been built at this point?
I will show you guys a video, because I actually had to go there and watch the homes get built, and I have, hands on. It was like, it's labor to build these homes from scratch, especially in El Salvador where they have like a really heavy rainy season. So you have to kind of be cognizant of that.
All right.
I'd say there's over 100 homes that have been built.
That's great.
So shout out to New Story. They're the ones who are really doing the work.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And, Ashley and I were talking about a week ago. There's a lot of land in the U.S. too. And I think we can probably start to incorporate similar technology here stateside, which would, I think, really help with a lot of what's happening with climate, what's happening at the border, a lot of this stuff that's happening here. I think it would be cool to see some of that here in the United States too, see some of this technology implemented in terms of how people are working, where they're living, how sustainable that is. So I'd love to see some of that here.
We're going to 3D print you a home.
I need one. You've been so great. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing. It sounds like, you're on a great trajectory to do good work, to continue to do good work. And please stay in touch.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me on the pod. This has been so much fun to just kind of talk out loud about a lot of these ideas. And I know you guys are continuously building a phenomenal community of people who are, kind of in this space as well. So I'm excited to listen to some of the other episodes. I've listened to some of the previous ones. So that was inspiration for me to say yes to this podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Darin.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.